Oh, thank you. Hey, Julius, while we're getting ready to get started, I see you're there. Could we check your audio real quick to see if we can get that working? If you could, like, step up to the mic if you're listening. Huh? Oh, okay. Julius had audio issues in HomeNet. Huh? This is the Meet Echo. See the big red button?
Yes. The eject button.
Why is that screen not displaying the same thing as this screen?
Because they're different. That's displaying the same as this. The one over there.
Yeah,
that one.
That's what I'm saying. The one over there is not displaying the same as
Maybe that's because that's supposed to be
for 3D.
Yeah, it's the full screen of the remote person. Maybe, I don't know.
When you finish this.
Okay.
Okay.
So how do we check on that?
I'm not sure what's the control.
Oh, they control remotely. Okay.
Hmm. Okie dokie.
Well, we're supposed to start.
You're supposed to have started 1 minute ago.
So it should be.
So it's, I guess, Russ is here. Is Russ white?
No, I don't see Russ.
Okay. Whatever. I guess
It's kind of a little bit on the upward hour side for Russ.
it's true. I guess. Where is he?
Don't touch it.
California? Or-
Don't break it.
He's in
Well,
North Carolina.
This screen over there is what you're on.
Yeah,
But,
you're right.
That's 3:40 a.m.
So somebody else touched it. And that's the problem.
Let me ping the.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, but Meet Echo is the problem.
Well, somebody. Oh, yeah. It should be showing the
Right.
virtual thing where the little figure walks up.
Still, we just need to convert the output on that one. But,
I guess I'll go take the sheets out.
Okay. So, who's going to jabber and who's going to take minutes? And I don't mean the type of jabbering you two are doing right now. Oh, there we go.
I can jabber.
Okay. Well, we know that, but are you willing to scribe? Okay. Is there anyone who's going to take minutes? And I can certainly get on and take minutes. And I see Gabrielle, and Gabrielle usually helps take minutes. If we can talk to these people.
Right. Good. Good. I guess that one's better. Okay. Okay. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Donald Eastlake. I'm with Huawei Technologies. This is the Babel Working Group meeting. So we have scribes, I guess, pretty much. Okay, there's a few technical problems. Can they hear us? Okay. Okay. Yes, if the mics are turned off, then probably no sound goes through to remote sites.
Yeah, the game may need to be done.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So Russ White is not here because he's in the U.S. He was unable to make it. So Barbara Stark's up here at the front table to help out. So can they hear us now?
Yes.
Okay. So,
What about
well, so I guess things are all set. So, oh, why doesn't this just flip to the next?
Oh, it got unset.
Is there?
There's usually some buttons over to the right. Pull it out.
Yeah.
Oh, I can
There
just.
should be a button, right?
That's it. You got it. Okay.
Well, I can move forward. I can move backwards. Okay. Well, it's.
Just don't.
Oh, I guess I can try using the control.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. Note well. You've probably seen this before. You're operating under the IETF IPR rule, so things you contribute, if you're aware of IPR and so forth, you need to disclose that, and just basically need to go look at these PCPs to get the full rules. Needless to say, this meeting is being recorded also. Just a general, oh, this is not, oh, well, that's okay, I guess. Document reviews, document quality relies on reviews. If you can, please help review the documents in the working group. We'll probably go over the document status a little bit more thoroughly than usual at this meeting. And if you do that and you have a document, then people will probably review your document. I did modify this slide to also have something on here reminding people that the boilerplate concerning requirements language, the capitalized musts and shoulds and mays and things like that, that language in draft should be updated to refer to RFC 8174 as well as RFC 2119. So I think most of the ones in this working group have been updated like that, but it's possible that they haven't all been. So this is the proposed agenda. We're right at the beginning to get things set up, then we'll go over status and milestones, the Babel information model, the Yang model, which we have a preliminary Yang model, changes to the Babel DTLS draft recently, and the general Babel protocol status, and then a wrap up at the end. Does anybody have a problem with this agenda? I want to add or delete things or change things around? Okay. So, document status. We have this applicability draft, which does have been judged to have working group consensus, and I just did a shepherd's review of it. It's a very short draft, and I did find a typo that was introduced by the update from 0-03 to -04. So I just posted a message. I think as soon as we have that fixed, I can request publication for that. I guess, so for program from this, yeah, I was going to go look at things a little more. Now, can I get out of?
Yeah, push that same button where the arrow is.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So.
And then you've got all the tabs lined up for the presentations.
But I wanted to display a web page.
Oh, just open up a new tab.
Okay. Not like
You know, put the plus sign on the top right.
okay.
Yeah, that one.
Okay. Okay, so I wanted to just go over the status of these documents a bit. Use a new. So the applicability draft is the only one which has been judged to have working group consensus. RFC 6126 BIS and the source specific draft are currently in working group last call. We've been there for a long time, and was kind of holding the 6126 BIS so that the security drafts could go through at the same time, because that seems like it would be useful to have them referenced from the 6126 BIS, and presumably the security drafts, the Babel DTLS and Babel HMAC drafts reference the RFC 6126 BIS, so they're sort of a package. So one question is whether people think that these two drafts, the Babel DTLS and Babel HMAC, are ready for working group last call. And we have an agenda item on the DTLS one, so I guess we could talk about that then. Does people have opinions on whether the Babel HMAC draft is ready for working group last call?
David Skenazy, Google. I think the document is in great shape, and in my opinion, it is ready for working group last call.
Are there any other opinions on that draft? Okay. So I'll probably start a working group last call on that later today. I plan to do a document shepherd's review on the source specific draft. We do have, there's also the information model draft, which we have a presentation on, so we can talk about its status then. And there's a Yang model draft, which is not, which perhaps we can do a call for working group adoption. That's also going to be presented, so we can talk about that at that point. And since this, the way I did this search, it catches anything with Babel in it, there is a HomeNet draft, which is in the RFC editor queue, currently in MISREF, I believe, waiting on 6126 BIS. So we're sort of holding up a document in another working group pending getting our main protocol draft through.
Sorry, which draft was in great shape?
The Babel HMAC, which is has a typo in it on this slide. It's not HMAN, it's HMAC. But I'll fix that. Okay. Yes, it's been asserted it's ready to have a working group last call done. And if that's incorrect, the working group last call should reveal that, so to speak, and we can fix whatever problems are found. Yeah. Let's see. So milestones, we have accomplished the milestones, and we're late on some of the ones, but not too bad. I think it's sort of about time we can make more rapid progress on these drafts. A lot of them are in good shape. Maybe we're a month late or something on some of these, but not too bad. And that's all the slides in this deck, so I guess the next, what is this, a PowerPoint? Oh, this is weird. I would have sworn I uploaded. Oh, well, anyway. The next item on the agenda is the information model.
Sorry.
No, I just want to keep getting out of your way. Oh, here's the map.
Hopefully this works. Oh, no, didn't work. Wasn't giving me the little buttons there.
They need to full screen it here. I just
Nice.
give us the arrows to check.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. I saw this near here and just had to take a picture. It's just like a kilometer away from here. Anyway, sorry. Okay, so I've sent email to the list before about this, but I have moved kind of my working editor's draft over onto GitHub in order to experiment with that. And Karsten, the wonderful person that he is, helped to change it from XML to MD, which actually is much easier for me to edit. And of course, there is a lovely HTML rendition, and you better get used to this new type of HTML format, because as we learned in working group chairs, we're all going to be going over to new HTML formats and things. Anyway, and over there is also the TR-181, just the Babel stuff, William, in case you're wondering, parts of of what I've put together from the information model. If you're curious, I recommend you go look at it. Okay, so these are the issues that are closed. We have introduced the binary data type used for router ID, and I've got it for the hello history. Let's see, we agreed not to change that. The version includes the name and implementation, got rid of external cost, and changed the enable parameters, descriptions, and then there's some other changes, and I'm not going to bore you with these. The IANA registry for link types, I have an issue about that one just because I need people to look at it to see if they like it, and we have some other questions on that. Okay, so the open issues. Please review the IANA consideration section because I did create a link type registry as we discussed in the last Montreal face-to-face. I did receive a comment from Karsten asking me, so why did you make the bullets normative and not the A, B, and F? And so if anyone else has thoughts on this, please feel free to, and I'll probably take these issues to the list as well, one by one, to see if we can get some closure on them. Now, the other question I had in looking at the lovely work Mahesh did was whether we need to go ahead and add more link types now for things like Mocha and G.HN and all sorts of other types. Nobody's rushing to say anything. Okay, so I'll just go through this. Next open issue is dealing with, oh, look. Who is it, Julius?
Yes.
Oh, you want me?
Oh, I can do it. You're on, Julius.
You better have audio.
Let's see, this time it's good.
No.
Can you hear me?
Sure.
Can you hear me? People on Mika Echo can hear me.
I see. This is a characteristic of Linux in general.
No?
I'm going to have to put together a kitty and collect money to get him a new machine so he can have audio.
Okay, some people can hear me, others
Like
cannot.
religious.
Is that correct?
No. I'm sorry, Julius, we can't hear you. You're going to have to jabber again.
Julius has had audio before in previous working group meetings when he wasn't physically present.
He's managed to get it to work sometimes, but this is a frequent occurrence.
Okay. We can
That
see
doesn't
you.
mean audio. Can we hear you?
Try saying
Can you hear me now?
audio. All right, I'll relay. Julius says, I'd be in favor of adding link types as needed, not in bulk.
As what? Not in
Not
bulk?
in both.
Link types, only adding them as needed,
As
not
needed.
just in bulk at the start.
Okay. Is there any other view? Does anyone else have an opinion?
I mean, I guess adding them as needed seems reasonable, but if there's oh,
Well, aren't they lucky? You better watch your language.
I wonder if there's a sound channel that we need to turn up here.
No, because we had this problem. Well, actually, I think Julius was the only person who tried in HomeNet also, so we have no other points of comparison.
Yeah, we reported on the Java already.
Oh, here's mute echo. Okay, while we're trying to get Julius fixed,
It's very hard to fix, Julius.
wow.
I think we can hear you, Julius. Stop laughing and say something.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, I don't see why in the implementation we would have any other link types.
Sorry,
So,
say that again?
I'm afraid that you're trying to export in the information model something that the implementation does not need to know about. The details between the different kinds of power line, Ethernet, and so on are just not relevant to the implementation. So I'm a little bit cautious about adding so many different link types unless they actually appear as needed from an implementation point of view.
Mahesh Jetanandani, writing the Yang model, I don't know if that would be considered implementation or not, but anyway, the model does allow for extensibility of the link types, which I guess would be good news. But the question of, I didn't quite understand, Julius, when you said that it's not, the definition of those link types is not relevant for implementation. My thought would be that the management system at least would need to know what link types are supported by the system for it to be able to configure it on the interfaces. But maybe I don't understand.
So yeah, I think we're not. So right now we have link types in Babel because Babel uses different metrics on different link types. Okay, so Babel is a routing protocol, and what it knows about is the information that it needs in order to do routing. Babel does not need to know what exact kind of interface it is. It needs to know whether it's a tunnel, whether it's a wireless interface or a wired interface. So are we here trying to put more information in the information model or in the Yang model than Babel actually needs to have in order to do proper routing? Okay, I'd be in favor of having the information model reflect what Babel already knows and needs to know.
So let me ask, so would it be accurate that if it would result in a different calculation algorithm, then we would need a different link type defined?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
David Skenazy, Google.
So not a very strong opinion. I don't feel strongly either way, but having that information available to things that query it, even though it doesn't impact the routing protocol, isn't absurd to me. So having it in there as an optional thing doesn't hurt my mind, but I really don't feel strongly about this.
Mahesh again. So if if the link type is not actually used by Babel itself, the question in my mind is, in the information model, we have this parameter that says, on this interface, this is the link type that is defined. So are we suggesting that that's optional to set and that it's okay if it's not set? Is that the...
No, I think what we're saying is that there will be a link type associated with every interface, but the set of link types that we need to be able to associate with interfaces does not need to be a large set. That is, we only need to have very gross definition categories of link types rather than really specific understanding of the physical link type.
William Lupton, Broadband Forum. Sorry, I haven't read the draft. But actually following on from what you just said, Barbara, I mean, when Julius explained what the link type's used for, it made me think that what really is maybe needed in the model is not really a link type, but some sort of enumeration that indicates the the input to the algorithm that doesn't necessarily have to be directly associated with the link type.
Well, we also have the metric computation algorithm.
Okay. And to the point about actually needing to know what the specific link type is, surely that information is available somewhere in the model on the device. I mean, it seems to me the actual physical link type is a sort of a layer 2 concept that probably, if it was put explicitly into the Babel information model, would actually be duplicate information. I mean, like you've got an interface stack. Surely the interface stack, if you've got a given interface, you've got the information to find out what the physical link type is, and that's probably the right way to find out what the physical link type is.
Can I take this one?
Go right ahead.
Can I take this one, Barbara? So actually what is underlying the algorithm are a number of parameters, like whether you're doing link quality estimation, whether you're doing RTT sensitive routing, and so on. But what we have found is that those are not understandable by the users. So we are actually encapsulating a set of algorithm parameters into the link type because that's something that the users understand.
So let me summarize. We do use the link type, and therefore it's good to be able to report the link type, but the link type is not necessarily the same as the physical link type, which, since we have a reference to the interface, we know the physical nature based on the information, the interface modeling that exists elsewhere. So that's already known, and what we really just need is what Babel considers to be this gross high-level link type that it associates with this particular interface. And so kind of what we have right now with the 4 enumerated values is good, and we should leave it there until we discover we find something else we need. Yes. Look, he nodded. Okay. And didn't nod off, just nodded. And Julius, I have to apologize for having accused you of being the cause of your audio issues. I was so wrong.
That's okay. I can forgive you that.
Okay. And I'm going to take the ABNF question to the list because that kind of came from Karsten, who's not here. Int. Yeah. So what the current information model thing is too fuzzy. I've noticed that everything we have that is an int is actually a 16-bit unsigned integer. And so I'm going to suggest that we change int to an unsigned integer data type. And the question I have is, should we also, while we're at it, restrict it to 16 bits, or does that even matter at the information model level? Because if we well, if we don't mention that it's 16-bit, we do need to mention that the max value is 2 to the 16th, which brings up the additional question of, there's lots of mentions of infinity, which came from the 6126 bis, which my understanding is infinity is actually just hex FFFF. Mahesh.
Yes, so from my perspective, I think it's helpful to be as precise as possible. In this case, I would like it to be specified that it's UN16 that we are trying to specify for all those parameters. Then the data model has no confusion in terms of the size. As far as mentioning the max, I think implicitly, if you set the UN to be 16 bits, I think it's implicit that the max value will only be 4Fs.
Okay, so we have agreement. We will change from int to uint, and definitely one way or another, the maximum is 2 to the 16th for all of these.
Yes.
Oh, fine.
No, 2 to the 16th.
William, behave.
No, it's 2 to the 16th minus 1. You know, the open parenthesis. Let's see.
Okay. Number 5 was actually a closed issue if you're counting, why we skipped from 6 to 4. So now we're on issue number 4, plus I thought it would make us feel a whole lot better that we're actually closer to the end than we thought we were. So this is credentials. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time discussing this here, but I need to bring up that I think, I kind of threw together something so that we would have something to throw things at. Now that we have the HMAC draft and we have the DTLS draft and we're proceeding with both of those, I want to change what I've got to actually be a model for an HMAC shared key credential and DTLS X509 credential, and just manage those specific things rather than this blobby credential thing. Does anyone have an objection to that? No objections. Okay. Oh, Julius is going to say something. Imagine that. Go ahead when you can.
I thought,
Push it harder.
Hi.
There you go. That did the trick.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. In HMAC, there is no defined format for the key.
But it
So
is a
that
shared
means
key, right?
it is a shared key, but the format is not defined because all you have on the wire are the signatures.
And that's,
Well,
So there is no on-the-wire serialization for the keys defined in HMAC.
But if you look at HMAC, it's just a byte string, right?
Yeah. But then you would need a registry of HMAC algorithms, wouldn't you?
Maybe. I don't know.
So I think it's...
Sorry,
I
Mahesh.
think,
Sorry.
yeah.
Go ahead, finish.
No, I'm fine. Go ahead.
So then the question I would, sorry, this is Mahesh. The question I would have is when we go to define this in the data model, we would have to define what the shared key format would be, or at least import it from an existing model that defines shared keys.
and we also need to make sure that whatever an implementation does in using the shared key to hash things out, that 2 different implementations do the same thing so that they actually think they're using the same shared key.
I think the HMAC definition.
Don't look at me that way.
RFC 2014 or whatever it is, or 2104, is clear enough on that. But the thing is that HMAC is based on a MAC algorithm. So you need a key, which is a byte string, and you need a MAC algorithm. to really specify what you're doing. So Julie, that's why Julie was asking if we need a registry of HMACs, which really boils down to a registry of hash functions, really. Sorry, hash functions. So hopefully there is such a registry around already, but if we have to do that. But.
David Skenazy, Google. I don't think there is such a registry. Each protocol that uses HMAC, as far as I know, defines its own registry, or each protocol that uses hash functions. For example, TLS has a registry of hash functions. IGV2 has a registry of hash functions. I don't think there's an arbitrary one. So in this case, in order to configure this, yeah, you would need the pair of hash function, comma, key. And so I think I agree with Julius. We would need to define an INA registry for hash functions used in Babel, and then it's just a byte string for the key that has arbitrary length.
So you think we need another registry?
Yeah.
Is it in the HMAC? It needs to be in the HMAC document, right?
That would be
Not necessarily. No, it doesn't, because for the HMAC document, the hash function is never sent on the wire, only the output. So as long as both implementations agree to use, let's say, SHA-256 with key foobar, then they're fine.
How do they agree to use SHA-256?
The same way they agree to use that key. You don't need a registry for that. The purpose of a registry
So
is
you
to
want
have
it in the
an
info, it's going to be configured, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
But
And
then there needs to be I need to look at the HMAC drafting, but there needs to be a security consideration section which says that, for example, probably the identity function is not a good hash function.
True. So the HMAC draft recommends SHA-256 as a mandatory to implement, which is considered secure today. And then you can define your own on the side. And the key size, yeah, it just says use the recommended key size for SHA-256, which is 32 bytes.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is for HMAC, for the information model for credential management and for HMAC management, is we need the shared key and we need to know the hashing function. Okay.
Yep.
For DTLS, we're using X509 certificates? Just like in TLS with the extended header or whatever stuff?
Not necessarily. DTLS can be keyed using certificates, using raw keys or raw asymmetric keys, using shared secrets, using a whole bunch of things. That doesn't really help answer your question, though.
No, it really doesn't. It makes it much more complex.
Exactly. So, yeah, the nebulous credentials in quotes is kind of all of the things DTLS can do. So for this, maybe for now we just say, hey, the model document only supports X509. I'd be fine with that.
Okay.
Mahesh, and that would be my recommendation, that the draft says that we're going to support only X509 certificate for now.
To clarify, the manager, sorry, what's the name of your draft again, Barbara?
Information model.
Thanks. The information model and Yang model can say that to configure, we only support X509, but the DTLS draft doesn't need to mandate that. Mahesh said true.
And then Mahesh and I are going to work out how to include language for modeling the adding and deletion of these things which are highly sensitive. And we're going to do that amongst ourselves. Okay, the security table, this is related, but right now I've got this security object kind of redundantly in two places. And feedback I've got from Broadband Forum is it would be nice if we only had it in one place, and it is actually possible to put it in one place by simply, if it refers only to a specific interface, then you simply have an interface reference within the object, and then we only need one object, and that really kind of simplifies things. Yeah. Anything? Nope. Okay, good. I'm going to consider that one closed. I'm going to do that. Okay, statistics. We have discussed statistics in the past. Do we want to add statistics? This is kind of these statistics I think we can add. Does anyone have thoughts? No thoughts whatsoever? Oh, that's really scary.
Adding some statistics seems a good idea to me, but
Yeah, Mahesh, I would absolutely agree that I think it would be good to include at least some basic amount of statistics.
Since Barbara is cursing me to give an opinion, David Skenazy. Yeah, no, stats sound fine as something that's optional. I would imagine some very lightweight implementations might not want to collect stats. So as long as it's optional, I think it's a really good idea.
Okay, and these are kind of the small set of stats that I would define. You can see the list. Okay, I'm going to try and put that in. Logs is the last thing, and Mahesh and I actually had a discussion about logs since we kind of do logs differently in Yang versus TR 181. And we're going to try to work it out amongst ourselves. But basically, I really dislike the way we currently have the logs modeled, and I'm going to change it. Because what we have is this weird thing where it's actually in the information model. And anyway, so if it's okay with you guys, I'm just going to work it out with Mahesh. Which means, by the way, Mahesh is now going to be an author of the information model.
woohoo.
Right? Okay, so my next step, I'm going to update a revision, and some of these I need to send out to the list, like the ABNF question. We're going to be updating the data models, and then the next question is when will we start WGLC, and I'm thinking maybe in the new year, maybe if we could do it maybe February-ish.
Well, I think if we have
Towards
these
the
issues
beginning?
resolved and a new version posted, we can do it then. I don't know.
If we have the issues resolved,
Yeah.
okay.
It could be sooner.
But we've got some holiday plans and things,
Okay.
so
Okay.
I think the goal is going to be sort of towards the beginning of the new year. I'd actually like to have WGLC completed before the broadband March meeting, which is a week before the IETF March meeting.
Okay.
So that's a goal. Okay, and I think, yeah, I just had some backup stuff in case people had questions about some of the IANA considerations, but nobody really did, so I don't need the backup slides.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I don't think anybody has any questions that didn't come up during it. So next we have
All right, so I'm going to present the Babel Yang model. My partner in crime is going to be Barbara. If there are any questions related to the model, you can point to me. As anything related to the Babel protocol itself, I would highly recommend talk to Barbara. Well, the motivation, mainly IETF wants a Yang model for pretty much any protocol that's defined. So this particular version of the model was based on 02. 03 was published after this draft had already been posted. So maybe one of the first things I'll be doing is bringing it up to date to the 03 version. It is a Yang 1.1 model, which may not mean much, but I just mentioned it. And the next statement is also not going to make too much sense, but it's NMDA compatible, which essentially means that it should work with all the modern NMDA-based management systems. If you have any questions about it, feel free to ping me. So the tree diagram, which is how Yang hierarchy is generally represented, this is subject to change. As I said, I think Barbara and I have a few things we need to sort out. So, but what you basically are seeing is a structure that's very, very similar to the information model. So there are, of course, in the base container, there is the usual version number, enable flag, router ID and all, but then it breaks out into transport section, subsection, interface subsection, routes and security. So I'll jump into a few set of questions that are in my mind, or they were in other people's mind, like Julius had a couple of questions, so I'll state something and then wait to see if anyone has any question or response to it. The first thing is interfaces. So the interfaces under the model are interface type defined in RFC 8343, which is the base, which is an interface Yang model. And there are different interface types that that model supports. So if there is an interface type that is not, that Babel needs to support, we may need to add that in the list of interface types. But I would imagine that almost every type of interface is already there. So the question is, does the interface type need to be restricted to a certain set of interfaces? I don't.
David Skenazy, Google. Julius can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think his one of his goals in Babel and our goals in the working group, continuing in that work, is to make it applicable anywhere it might work. As Julius said, it's a routing protocol, it routes. So I don't think we need any kind of restriction. I think just using the standard, if like the Yang model has definitions for all the interface types in existence, let's just use that.
Okay. Yeah, so there are both physical, virtual tunnel interface types that are defined by 8343. So,
and there are Babel deployments on virtual as well, and there are also, I think that makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
Sorry, William Lupton, Broadband Forum. Sorry, just to clarify though, but presumably you wouldn't want it to apply to a layer 1 interface or a layer 2 interface. I mean, right? I mean, you're not talking about a physical layer interface like a DSL port, are you?
Yeah.
So you might, okay.
I mean, there's no, currently as it is, there's no restriction.
Right. So there shouldn't even be any layer restriction in terms of what type of interface you might register. Just confirming, because I mean, I think from the point of view of Yang backwards compatibility, it's best to start as narrow as possible, and then in augmentation, in future versions, you can expand. This is the when. If you put a when, right? If you put a when on there, then from the Yang rules, you can always support additional interface types later. But if it was wide open to begin with, then you can't narrow it down later. I believe that's what the rules are.
That, I mean, if you start with when statement, that is going to be one huge statement.
Well, no, but I mean, potentially it can be done in terms of, attributes of the interface using an identity hierarchy.
Well, you have to, if you're looking for restricting it, then you have to specify in the when statement that the IF type is of this type.
Right, but it doesn't necessarily have to be specifically the IF types. It could be an identity derived from, from which the IF types are derived.
Right. So right now, the identity ref is to an interface type.
Okay.
Which is,
sorry, I'm just trying to reflect some of the experience we've had in the broadband forum, and which may not apply here, which is that when we define something that augments an interface or points to an interface, then we try to make it as restrictive as possible, because we know we can make it less restrictive later on. And so I was just wanting to confirm that there really needed to be absolutely any type of interface here would be applicable, no matter what layer. And if that's the case, then that's fine, and I'll go away.
That's pretty much what it is right now.
Just to clarify what you mean by layer, Babel does have a requirement today in that it routes IP. So what I meant is all IP interfaces in existence.
Right.
Well, sorry, I am very not knowledgeable in this world. So Maybe we restrict it to IP interfaces. That would be fine by me.
To the right, maybe?
Well, then I guess let's take a quick step back into what we're trying to get out of this. Because if I have a Babel router and I want to manage it remotely and get some information, I do want to know, let's say, for example, that on this side it's Ethernet and on that side it's Wi-Fi. At the end of the day, both of those carry IP. And what conceptually from the Babel, yes, they're IP interfaces, but what we're trying to get out of here is some more information about what's under IP. So as long as that interface can carry IP, it works.
So, Barbara, so both the Yang and TR-181 have layered interfaces. For every interface, you happen to know, like if it's an IP interface, you know what 802.3 interface is, if it's, on top of an Ethernet MAC, is below that. And then below that, it would be maybe your physical interface. If it's tunneled, you may have additional, you may have, I don't know, a 464X IPv4 on top of an IPv6. But that's still, that's still an IP interface there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if we restrict it to IP interfaces, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
If we can.
If we can, currently my understanding is you cannot, there's nothing defined as IP interface only. I mean, there are interface types, which is whether it's a tunnel type or it's a, I don't know if I remember of the interface types that are in the IANA registry. I think there's even an IANA registry of IF types. I don't think so. There is something which says it's IP type.
Well, William Lupton. But I mean, if there's a missing interface type, then one can ask, if there really is a missing interface type, one can ask for it to be added. But I mean, the way that the interface, the 8343 stuff works, I always have to go back and check. I mean, it is an identity hierarchy. So there may be ways of doing this that don't actually require the reference to specifically to an IANA IF type. I think there may be a way of doing this using more of a, an appropriate point in the identity hierarchy. But that would require, at least on my part, research to, I can't give an answer. But I do think that if one's worried about future extensibility, it's good to start narrow, in the sense of what I mean is really constrain the interface types, because per the, whatever it is, section 11 rules in 7950, the ones that say what are acceptable changes to a future version of the Young model, I believe that you can, for the when statement, you can allow it to apply to more things, but you can't narrow it to apply to fewer things.
Yeah, you're thinking of backward compatibility.
Yeah, the backwards compatibility, which is, I think, an important consideration for a Young model.
It's a good point whether restricting is a backward incompatible change, or are you just redefining? Because you can do the same thing with the deviation statement in Yang. You're not necessarily changing the model, you're just saying that I don't support certain types of interfaces.
Right. I have to go back and always read that section, but I believe it explicitly says that you can make a when statement apply to more things. Whereas, of course, I mean, we wouldn't use restrictions deviations in a standard model, would we?
No.
No.
So maybe we should move along, just because
Okay.
we had some extra time, but we're kind of using it up. So.
Okay. And there was a question of what is the designated outgoing interface, and I think that's defined in the model as leaf neighbor. Question number 2, or issue number 2, Babel link types. I think we discussed this quite a bit already in the context of the information model. So I'm going to kind of skip over some of the questions because I think I have the answers. So unless someone wants to bring up any more clarifications, I did have a private conversation with Barbara on this, and I think I'm kind of clear on how the link type is going to be used. I think the same is true for the metric computation algorithm and the security supported. The last, of course, is going to change substantially. Right. So this is a bigger question for the working group. Yang has already defined a base routing model that takes care of things like routes, RIB, VRF interfaces, and routing policy.
Quick clarifying question, David. Can you define those acronyms, please?
Oh, okay. So routes, of course, are routes. RIB is sorry,
Route,
information base.
a routing information base is the thing from which you calculate the forwarding information base, which is what is actually in the hardware. Yep.
And VRF is virtual routing and forwarding.
Okay. Sorry, we out here just assume people know what these acronyms are.
That's why you have those backup slides.
All right. So the first question I have is, does Babel need to support the base routing model? The base routing model currently has definitions for routes, RIB. So if we need to, I mean, almost all routing protocols per 8349 definition are supposed to augment, which means use that as a base model, and then Babel is kind of augmented under it.
Martin Vigor speaking. So I'm trying to answer that by asking a question. If we don't support that, how do we do? Do we develop our own?
Right. So, yeah, to try to answer that, your question, I'm not going to try asking another question is, because the information model has a block for routes today, and I don't think so there's anything for RIB. But if we choose not to, then we are kind of fragmenting the routing table in some sense between Babel and all the other protocols that might be running. So I'm guessing that the answer is yes, we need to augment the base routing protocol model.
I'm not the one deciding. So Martin, Martin speaking again.
Maybe you should start from that and see if you run into problems, because it seems like what people do. Yeah.
Right. The next question is, does Babel need to support VRF?
And just from my brief look at these things, and I don't know a whole lot more than the rest of you, I really always worry about needing to support anything that is still in a draft, because that creates dependencies.
Yes, so it might, at the worst case, do a misref, but I think not doing it probably, I don't know if it might create more problems for us. I'm throwing it out there.
I did push the button, so I don't know what the status is.
Just to add a data point, there are at least 2 implementations of Babel that support VRF, and the configuration of that thing is a mess. So I don't know if we want to put it in the Yang model, but I'd be nervous.
Okay.
David Skidazzi. So there was talk of delaying the Babel work because of the Yang model, which slightly changed the charter for that. So if this ends up in misref state, I feel very strongly that it should not delay 6126 bis. If this document is in misref for a little bit longer, that's okay, but I really want to get 6126 bis out the door. So for the chairs and AD, as long as 6126 bis isn't blocked on this, that's okay. But if it is
Yeah.
blocked, then I would raise
No,
a strong objection.
that was the purpose of the charter change. It's no longer
Okay,
required
cool.
by the charter, and I don't believe the actual draft refers to this in any way, so.
Yeah, I concur with you.
Yeah.
Martin, speak.
Thank you.
Okay, actually, I should have gone to the backup slides for each one of these questions. But,
We don't really have enough time. to do
okay,
that.
so the last one is, does Babel need to support routing policy? And for that, sorry. Oh, I guess I don't have the latest slides here. But anyway, so it provides a generic policy framework, and if we need that capability, then I would need to add that.
I don't know what the story is. It's not, the agenda slide isn't my latest agenda slide either. I uploaded your slides and I uploaded my slide. I don't know why we're not getting the latest ones on this Chromebook here.
Okay.
What? Oh. I think they're good enough.
You're right. Unless someone wants to really know what the details of
Yeah.
the routing policy model is. So the question is, do we need to support routing policy?
Martin Vigo speaking again. You need to support it if you need it in the protocol. Otherwise, you don't need to support it in the model.
Okay. All right.
The model is the one that needs to be consistent with the protocol, not the other way around.
True, but it can, well, I guess you're right. To be consistent with the rest of the system, yes, it needs to. I'm just making sure that the work group knows. Okay, so the open question, is this work useful? And if so, can we have the work adopted?
I believe the charter basically still now says we should do a Yang model, and I think much of the IETF considers Yang to be something of some use. I don't know. So
David Skenazy, yeah, so especially given that this is in the charter, this is useful. And so I wanted to state, like, thank you so much for doing this, because I do not understand Yang, and I'm really glad that we're doing it. Like, I'm not doing it. So thank you so much. And I fully support adoption of this and us moving forward with it.
yeah. Does anybody have any objections doing a call for working group adoption? Seeing none, no objections, I will issue such a call.
All right, thank you.
I guess the problem is I should have refreshed the web page of the meeting materials before, but that's not immediately obvious anyway.
Relaying, I think Julius said +1, which I think
Okay.
was to the support of adoption.
Yes. Well, people need to do that on the web page. So you're next. Babel already told us.
Thank you. Wow, we don't have a pink box here. We have a pink X. How does that work? All right, so a very quick update on Babel over DTLS. My name is David Skenazy, and this was a document that was written with Antonin Decimo and Julius Hobacek. So very quickly, the idea is you use multicast hellos to discover neighbors. Once you've discovered a neighbor, you establish a DTLS connection, then you run everything else inside DTLS, and it's safe. Yay. So the idea is we have two security systems for Babel. One is HMAC, which is DTLS. This one has more dependencies, especially you need a DTLS library, which isn't always easy on very constrained devices, but it also has more features. The main feature is granularity of trust. You have different keys, meaning you can have like asymmetric keys. So for example, in a home net-like scenario, you can have a cert with a private key on each router, and then you can revoke a given router from your system, which you can't do with HMAC. So in those kind of deployments, we recommend DTLS, but for everything simple, we recommend HMAC. And that was the motivation. Great. Another benefit you get is that the traffic is encrypted, so someone who doesn't have the keys can't see the topology of your network. So we just published -01 before the deadline. Now, there was an open question which we solved, is that the DTLS uses a separate port that we're going to ask from IANA as the destination port. And then the connections are initiated from an ephemeral client port like any other use of the DTLS protocol. Another slight change is now I heard yous need to be inside DTLS. They're not allowed outside in the clear. And that really simplifies the security boundary of the protocol. The only thing you can see outside is hellos, so you cannot establish bidirectional reachability with someone who doesn't have keys. A lot simpler. One slight change that Julius pointed out is that if you're using the RTT extension, then you need to send unicast hellos inside the DTLS as well, so that way you can do the RTT. And we did some editorial changes to clarify the motivation, thanks to Tony P's review. And that's it. We think the document is in good shape, and we'd like to motion for working group last call.
Okay, are there any comments on this presentation or the document or the question of working group last call? And Julius is asking for attention.
Is anyone on Jabber in the room? Just to make sure. I'll go.
So first, I'd like to say that I support the change of requiring IHUs to be protected. And the argument that convinced me is the fact that it makes it easy to convince yourself that the protocol is secure. If IHUs need to be protected, then you never create a symmetric association with somebody who doesn't have the key. Okay, so that makes it easy to convince yourself that the protocol is secure. The other point I think is important to mention, the other reason you want to have DTLS in addition to HMAC, in addition to your 2 points, is in case you run into trouble because people are telling you you don't want to do your own crypto. Okay, there is this point of view that one should not be doing their own crypto, which I don't necessarily agree about, but some people might be in this kind of environment, and DTLS solves quite nicely the problem of delegating the crypto to DTLS.
I agree. Thanks, Julius.
Okay, so I'm not hearing any objections. I'll do a working group last call on this. I guess I may probably post it'll start it later today, but maybe run it for 3 weeks because we're in the middle of IETF week and everybody's busy and stuff like that.
That sounds great. Thanks. And if people in the room on the Jabber haven't read the document, it's like 5 pages long. So please take a quick look and let us know what you think.
Next, we have recent changes to RFC 6126 BIS. Yes, he's the presenter.
Hello.
Hello.
So this is joint work with David Skenazy, which I didn't put. I'm sorry. It's a copy-paste first slide. Next, please.
What is it? What did he say?
Next slide, please.
Okay, oh, sorry, I understand. Yes. Oh,
You can use the remote.
oh, the remote. I have the remote. That doesn't work.
Push that button on the right.
I did push that button on the right.
Push it one time.
Oh, one time too many. Okay, I think we've overcome that technical problem. We're now on the second one.
Okay, so there was 6126, which defined the original Babel, 7557, which defines the extension mechanism. And the two have been unified. We've put them together and we've made 6126 BIS, which is now at -06. And so there are a number of clarifications, of tightenings. There are quite a few loosenings because over the years we have understood that what I had done in the original 6126 was overly restrictive, and we understand now that there are things that we can do which we didn't understand then. And we have deliberately refrained from adding new features unless we actually use them. We've just added improved neighbor discovery and link sensing. So it turns out that the algorithm itself works pretty well. And usually when people run in trouble, it's because of neighbor discovery and link sensing. So we've added unicast hellos. That was David's and Toki's work. We've added unscheduled hellos, and we have a more extensible packet format, mandatory sub-TLVs, and we now have a packet trailer, and that's new in -06, and it would be really good if people could review it. Next, please. So unicast hellos, that was done by David, so I don't feel very comfortable speaking about it, but in 6126, all TLVs can be sent either over unicast or multicast, except hellos, which must be sent over multicast. In 6126 bis, David and Toki have added a new kind of hello, the unicast hello, which is sent over unicast to just a single neighbor, and except for that, it has all of the features of an ordinary hello. And we believe it can be useful on link layers with outrageously expensive multicast, in which you want to avoid sending periodic multicast hellos. And it can be used if you need to carry a sub-TLV that can only be stuck on a hello in a unicast packet. And the obvious example, the only sub-TLV we have right now is the timestamp sub-TLV, which David mentioned in his talk. And other than for the hello sub-TLV, unicast hellos are not required by the DTLS extension, which protects everything except hellos. Next, please. There are unscheduled hellos. So in 6126, every hello resets the link quality timer. So it's difficult to send a hello at an arbitrary time. In 6126 bis, we have a notion of an unscheduled hello, which is just like a hello, but it doesn't reset any timers. So that's something that doesn't cost much. It's a small extension to the protocol, and it simplifies the implementation somewhat if you need to send unscheduled hellos. Next, please. The big change in 6126 bis, and that is mostly due to Gwendoline Schwan, who harassed me for weeks until I agreed to add it to the protocol, and she was right, is the mandatory sub-TLV. So in the original 6126, a Babel packet was just a sequence of TLVs. And whenever you saw an unknown TLV, you'd ignore it. In 7557, I added the notion of a sub-TLV. So every TLV, most TLVs can contain sub-TLVs. And if you don't understand a sub-TLV, you ignore the sub-TLV, but you still honor the rest of the TLV. And in 6126 bis, we added mandatory sub-TLVs. So a mandatory sub-TLV, if it is unknown or misparsed for any reason, it causes the whole enclosing TLV to be ignored. So that is a dramatic simplification to protocol extensions. We've seen it with source-specific. It's shrunk by half when we got mandatory sub-TLVs. They are a little bit more complicated to implement. They add some 20 lines of code to your implementation if you're not doing sub-TLVs, because you have to walk every TLV that you understand to see whether there are any mandatory sub-TLVs that you don't understand. It's well worth it. Next, please. And the new feature in 612 in -06 is the packet trailer. So a Babel packet has three parts. There's a fixed size packet header of 4 bytes. There's the packet body, which is a sequence of TLVs. And after the body, there is a trailer, which I defined in original 6126, and I said it's silently ignored. We don't know what to do with it, but it naturally came up. And the intent of that was to carry cryptographic signatures. Now in 6126 bis, in -06, we've extended the packet format to define the packet trailer, which is now a sequence of TLVs. You can reuse the same parser as for the packet body. And it's only used by the HMAC extension. The HMACs that cover the packet body are carried in the trailer. So what happens here is that you avoid the dance, of having to erase the HMAC before you compute the HMAC, because the HMAC does not cover itself because the HMAC is in the trailer. So there's a trade-off here. We have complicated the specification, And what we got in exchange was that the implementation is much simpler. Toki, who did the other implementation of HMAC, agrees with me. It's well worth the trade-off. Now, it used to be an appendix of the HMAC draft. In -06, I've put it in the body, and the only review I had was from Toki, who said that my English is absolutely horrible and that I have to rewrite it, but he agreed with the contents. So please review this. This is new stuff, and we'll be stuck with it if we get it wrong. Next, please. Okay, so just a quick note about compatibility with 6126. Unicast hellos and mandatory sub-TLVs are incompatible extensions. So understanding them is some 20 lines of code, but we need to add it to all implementations before we can start sending them. And the current status is that we've done the work in BabelD, in Bird, in SBabelD, and in David's top secret implementation I'm not allowed to tell you about. We haven't done it in FRR, and there is one that I've missed here. We haven't done it in PyBabel. So it needs to be done in FRR and PyBabel, and then we can start sending the fancy new sub-TLVs. Next, please. Well, thank you for your attention.
What did you say? What did you say?
I said thank you for your attention.
Okay. So I have a sort of a question, which actually Martin might want to pay attention. So we have this RFC 6126 BIS main draft, and I haven't looked at it recently. I probably should have. We have these two security drafts, two security mechanisms, DTLS and HMAC. So what does 6126 BIS currently say about the implementation requirement level for these security ones? Should neither one or both be mandatory to implement or recommended or whatever?
So here I have a slight disagreement with my respectable co-author. So I believe that we should be strongly recommending HMAC and keeping DTLS optional. And I don't think we should put HMAC as MTI. So if there is strong pressure to make HMAC MTI, I'm not going to object because I think it's a clean and simple extension that it is reasonable to require. But I would much prefer it to be simply strongly recommended and not MTI.
David Skenazy. So to reply to my respectable co-author, no, I agree. That's perfectly fine by me. What's MTI or not, I don't really have a strong feeling. So here's a proposal for a strategy moving forward. We have normative references in the document to both security mechanisms, saying what I was saying earlier, that we recommend HMAC unless you need the other features that HMAC doesn't have. And we try to move this forward to publish it. If there's huge pushback that it must be MTI, then twisting our arms, we add MTI, but I would like to try to get through the process in support of Julius without MTI. So maybe Martin, can you comment on process, how that would work?
Yeah, I was going to say usually security people would like there to be one security method that is mandatory to implement for interoperability, but
Martin speaking. I want to try without see where we go up until where it can go with that approach. And if it's, let's say, the consensus of the working group to follow that path, let's try to follow it. And if you stumble across a hard security AD, then you might need to revise that position.
Sounds like a plan. Is there any objection to following that plan? I'll post something on the mailing list about it to see if there's objections on the mailing list, but we'll go with the plan of normatively referencing both from RC 6126 BIS and recommending use of HMAC unless there's a specific requirement needing some of the features of DTLS.
Martin speaking. You'd be in a very difficult situation if you had no security mechanism, but but since you have, and since you're recommending a use, I think that's already a very good step.
Julius, David speaking. Can I ask you to write that text since you respectably disagreed with my proposal of text? And that way we can submit a -07 and Donald can then proceed to move the document forward?
Yeah, it's in Git. My proposal is in Git already. I'm going to revise the English of my text, the prose of my text about the trailer, and then get in touch with you and we'll submit.
Deal.
Okay. So, that's kind of the end of the agenda. Anybody want to bring anything else up for this meeting? We have 10 minutes left.
Can I just say thank you to Gabrielle Guernes again for helping with the minutes remotely? You're amazing, Gabrielle.
And I'd like to thank Barbara for doing minutes too, and everybody helping out. Nobody seems to be bringing up any topics, so I guess we'll adjourn this meeting. See people on the mailing list or the next IETF meeting.